Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Eat Everything: How to Ditch Additives and Emulsifiers, Heal Your Body, and Reclaim the Joy of Food. By Dawn Harris Sherling, M.D. Narrated by Rachel Perry. Publisher's note: this audiobook contains references to material present in the print and e-book editions of the book. Author's note: this book is based on research, interviews with leading experts, and my experiences as a physician and as a patient. In this book, patients' names have been changed, and in some cases their stories have been combined to protect their anonymity. Introduction. Emma is a patient I will never forget. That's because doctors forever remember the patients we failed. Emma, a bespectacled 23-year-old, accompanied by her mother, came to me not for a second opinion, but for what must have seemed like a last-chance long shot. She had driven down to Boston from Maine, which was my first clue that something was really wrong. Mainers are the toughest of New Englanders and make that hours-long drive for medical care only when they are in dire straits. By the time she showed up to see me at the Brigham and Women's Hospital outpatient office where I worked, Emma was subsisting mostly on granola bars. She said that if she tried to eat anything else, she would spend the day with a bloated belly and nauseated, and she would have to run to the toilet to evacuate her bowels, but never feel as if she had experienced a complete bowel movement. Sticking to the granola bars helped her, but she still felt slightly nauseous all the time. She had been evaluated by a gastroenterologist, a specialist that focuses on the stomach and intestines, who tested Emma for celiac disease and had done several additional tests, including an upper endoscopy and colonoscopy, to rule out the possibility of other diseases. She had also seen an infectious disease specialist, an endocrinologist, a dietitian, and a psychiatrist. None of the medications she had tried provided her with much relief. She had been told she had anxiety, an eating disorder, and irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. Despite her best efforts at incorporating dietary advice from the dietitian, this hadn't helped her much either. As I reviewed Emma's records, I realized I didn't have much else to offer her. Her workup had been pretty thorough, but Emma's mother insisted it was not all in her head, as her doctors in Maine had ultimately decided. Her mother knew Emma, as only a parent can know her child, and was convinced something was physically wrong with her. Her formerly happy, productive daughter had become miserable and was afraid to eat and go out. I had recently finished my primary care internal medicine residency at the Brigham after graduating cum laude from the Yale School of Medicine, and was now an instructor of medicine at Harvard University. I thought I knew a lot, but from working at one of the best medical centers in the country, I understood there were people who were much smarter and more experienced than I was. So I referred Emma to them. She saw another gastroenterologist and endocrinologist. She had more tests, all showing no evidence of physical disease. And then she came back to see me. Without a blood test, biopsy, or scan specifically designed to diagnose it, IBS is known as a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning other diseases are searched for, and if they aren't found, and it sounds like the person has IBS, that's the diagnosis they are given. Since so few treatments are available for IBS, and there is thought to be a powerful brain-gut connection, I suggested that a psychologist in Maine might be her best bet. She agreed to find a psychologist on her own, and both she and her mother stood up, shoulders heavy, eyes cast down, and left my office for the last time. Shortly thereafter, as a new mom tired of Boston's unforgiving winters and with a lack of extended family in the area, I decided to return to my home state of Florida. I didn't see Emma again, but I could never shake the feeling that something else had been going on with her, something that I couldn't quite figure out at the time. Emma was the first patient I had seen who was able to clearly articulate that what she was eating had an obvious effect on her health. But she certainly wasn't the last one to tell me that. The problem was that neither Emma nor anyone else could sort out what it was that was making her feel so ill. Years passed, and though not as severely as Emma, I started to feel ill after eating too. I began to develop IBS, and it was getting worse. I first decided to cut out dairy, proclaiming myself lactose intolerant. When that didn't help much, after about 6 months, I got rid of bread and other foods containing gluten. A year later, becoming increasingly frustrated, I started on a low FODMAP diet, short for low in fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. More on this in Chapter 1. The highly restrictive eating plan that had become the medical standard for patients with IBS. The list of foods I was supposed to avoid was long. Patients to whom I had recommended low FODMAP would come back from the dietitian and plead, "Just tell me what I can eat." Like my patients, I hated the low FODMAP diet. It made me feel as though I couldn't enjoy normal life. The science behind it is solid, but the commitment to it was challenging to the point of being near impossible to stick with. And it doesn't work as well as most patients need it to. Ultimately, many IBS sufferers give it up, but I had been led to believe that food avoidance was the best treatment there was. After a year, I was mentally and physically exhausted from trying to get my bowels to behave. But I was determined not to let my IBS get in the way of family activities, especially not when my husband and I decided to plan a trip to Italy with the kids. Everyone was excited for our vacation, including me. Although, privately, I wondered if I would be able to enjoy the food in Italy at all. Bread, garlic, onions, cheese, all these critical components of Italian cuisine were on my avoid list. Traveling to Italy was a tremendous privilege, and I vowed I would figure it out. On the road to Rome, the over-air-conditioned tour bus eased its way into the highway rest stop parking lot. Pulling up next to the nondescript yellow stucco building, distinguished only by its bright red roof. Our jet-lagged group trudged off the bus in a line toward the combination quick-serve restaurant and convenience store. But for the Italian words on the sign, this could have been a rest stop nearly anywhere in the U.S. My first real Italian meal was at a place called the Auto Grill. The unappetizing name notwithstanding, our tour guides assured us that the food would be good here. We were told to order our pasta dish at one side, pay for it, and present the receipt to the food servers. If we wanted coffee, it would have to be ordered separately at the far side of the establishment. Rest stop pasta was not exactly the culinary experience I was hoping to have in Italy. I took my place in line, envisioning oily noodles covered by a heavily salted, runny sauce sitting in chafing dishes. But despite my initial impression, this rest stop in Italy was not at all the same as a rest stop in the U.S. Within a few minutes, I realized there were no chafing dishes, and the only oil I saw was the small amount put into the pan as one cook heated the fresh marinara sauce I had ordered, while another dipped the pasta into boiling water. When al dente perfection had been reached, she brought the drained pasta over to the pan and neatly added it to the marinara, deftly turning it to coat every dangerously gluten-filled strand with the perilously acidic red sauce. Freshly grated cheese was added. Oh no. And I was then handed an honest-to-goodness ceramic dinner plate. Small puffs of steam wafted from the dish, the garlicky aroma making me a little giddy. To think this was what passed for fast food in Italy. I pushed aside my fears and decided that I was going to enjoy my trip, which meant this would be lunch. I couldn't help but eat every bite, only vaguely wondering how much garlic and onion might be in the sauce. Whatever the consequences of my meal, surely the fresh pasta would be worth the bathroom drama that might later ensue. In any case, the journey to our hotel was expected to be short. And yet, the bus ride turned out to be blissfully uneventful, save my children squabbling about something or other. To my surprise, I didn't feel heavy or bloated after my large plate of spaghetti. Actually, I felt great, newly energized for our Italian adventure. Despite this success, I reminded myself to be cautious. Over the last several years, my bowels had become unpredictable. Like Emma, I hadn't been able to figure out any pattern, but my problem was clearly linked to what I was eating. Some days were terrible, with everything I ate struggling to find its way through my intestinal twists and turns. And some days, I hardly noticed my gut at all. On my first day in Italy, the gods of intestines must have been smiling down on me. Perhaps I would be okay that day, but suffer on another. So later that evening, I decided I would try only small bites of my kids' gelato and wait for the inevitable disaster. Hours passed, then a whole day. Nothing happened. I bravely decided to move on to my own gelato. Another uneventful day. So then I began requesting the fresh whipped cream on top, too. And still, my bowels were behaving. Within 3 days of being in Italy, we had consumed an embarrassingly large amount of gelato. In our defense, the weather was very warm. And not only had nothing bad happened, but somehow, without trying, my bowels were back to normal. Like when I was a medical resident in my 20s, downing pepper and onion pizza. I ecstatically feasted my way through the country, eating everything from creamy cacio e pepe pasta in Rome, to giant cuts of steak in Florence, to inexplicably light, crusty, and doughy Neapolitan pizza topped with fresh mozzarella di bufala wherever it was offered. I wasn't thinking about my intestines at all. It was a great trip. Sadly, the day after returning to the U.S., my bowels were back to misbehaving. What was different in Italy? Had it been the walking? The lowered stress of being on vacation? Maybe I had been eating more roughage. The fruits and veggies had been delicious after all. I was disappointed and tried to walk more, eat more fiber, but to no avail. My IBS was back in full force. And then, amazingly, we were able to go back to Italy the following summer. I didn't know what would happen, but this time I didn't hesitate to begin my eating adventure. And again, within a day, my bowels had normalized. This trip, however, there was less walking and more stress, eliminating lack of exercise, and higher emotional distress as causes of my IBS. It most definitely wasn't in my head, and it wasn't in my legs either. And then I remembered my patients who had gone on whole food diets telling me their IBS had gotten better. And I started to wonder what was in the Italian food that wasn't in my food back home. Or perhaps it was the other way around. Italians take a great deal of pride in preparing their food, and eating is a source of joy, not discomfort or restriction. Where we visited, chefs had not yet given up on scratch cooking. If something wasn't fresh, it was noted on the menu. They used fresh, in-season ingredients and, more so than Americans, avoided ultra-processed substitutes. Italians also don't suffer from IBS, diabetes, or obesity at the rates Americans do. Could these things possibly be related? Both for my own health and that of my patients, I decided I'd make it my mission to find out. What I began to realize in Italy and by paying closer attention to my patients, eventually became an investigation that turned everything I thought I knew about what we should be eating on its head. This book is a culmination of those efforts. I discovered that IBS is just the canary in a coal mine of a host of diet-related diseases like fatty liver and diabetes. Although I first attributed my IBS cure to something amorphous in the Italian ether, the truth was that the ingredients I was eating there were whole and simple. Most importantly, free of the additives, artificial sweeteners, emulsifiers, and thickeners that have become ubiquitous in most Americans' diets. To be clear, I'm not just talking about the junk food and greasy drive-through fare that many of us picture when we hear the familiar lament about the standard American diet. As with many of my patients, I thought I was eating healthfully. I shunned fast food, ate salads often, and filled my shopping cart with packages promising the contents were sugar-free, or plant-based, or whole, or natural. And yet, I was spending an hour a day on the toilet, and I was miserable. So I began reading. Every day I scanned my food packages and found a new ingredient to look up. To my surprise, there was evidence that many of the additives I was eating had significant effects on the microbiome, the bacteria, fungi, and viruses that live in our intestines, which we are learning can have wide-ranging effects not only on our gastrointestinal system, but on how much we weigh, our moods, and even our immune system. The evidence I found wasn't on some fringe website, but in highly respected peer-reviewed journals like Nature, Cell, Gut, and Gastroenterology. Then, as I was working on this manuscript, societies like the International Organization for the Study of Inflammatory Bowel Disease, IOIBD, began recommending that colitis sufferers avoid several of the additives discussed in this book. Dietitians and gastroenterologists are now urging patients to avoid additive-laden foods to ease bowel symptoms. It turns out that some of our digestive systems are trying to reject emulsifiers and other ubiquitous additives that are causing problems within our digestive tracts and well beyond. And yet, most of the media, and the marketers who sell us healthy foods, haven't caught up. The United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has yet to act on a growing pile of evidence that those ingredients, even in safe amounts, can do us harm. That mounting evidence is telling us what my patients were telling me for years, if only I had known how to hear them. Some of the highly processed foods we eat are making us sick, and the restrictive diets that doctors tell their patients to try are difficult and only minimally helpful for far too many. As I was writing this book, I considered how my patients asked me to tell them what they could eat instead of what they couldn't. I soon realized that they, and I, could eat everything, as long as most of it was real food, unadulterated by gut-roiling additives. If you seem to be struggling with your bowels, your blood sugar, your weight, or just not feeling right after you eat, and nothing seems to be helping very much, this book is for you. Even if you are just trying to eat healthfully, but are tired of conflicting dietary advice that seems to change from year to year, this book is for you too. In Part 1, I will explain why certain food additives have become ubiquitous in what we eat, what they are doing to our microbiomes, and how this may be leading to astronomical levels of diet-related diseases. Part 2 was inspired by my patients asking me to tell them what to eat and is a practical guide to navigating the foods you may encounter throughout the day. In Part 3, I discuss how to navigate eating out, how to attempt to lose weight if that's a goal of yours, and how to troubleshoot specific issues that you might be facing. The print and ebook versions of the book include some recipe ideas and a list of which additives to avoid so you can quickly review why they are best left on the shelf. We are all different, but we have something in common. We do much better when we eat real food. Part 1. Real food is not the enemy. Chapter 1. The microbiome and the rise of diet-related diseases. Health is not valued till sickness comes. Thomas Fuller. Rodrigo is a 52-year-old father of 2 grown children. He has been married for 30 years and has worked 6 days a week since he was a teenager. He attends church on his only day off each Sunday and manages to make it there some weekdays after work, too. He has worked in the construction industry in the U.S. for more than 20 years, ever since immigrating from his native Honduras. His large biceps and thick forearms suggest that he still does a great deal of manual labor most of the day. I ask anyway, "What do you do at work?" Rodrigo smiles. "Whatever I have to," he replies, and then expands on the answer. He hauls lumber, pounds flooring, lays tile, paints. On weekends, he spends a few more hours helping his parish priest with minor repairs to the church. Despite burning what must add up to hundreds of additional calories a day, his energy expenditure at his job equaling or exceeding the workouts of dedicated athletes, Rodrigo's gut hangs heavily over his belt. He has tested as having blood sugar in the diabetic range. He notes that a brother has type 2 diabetes, but no one in the older generation of his family does. "No one?" I ask, just to be sure. Rodrigo shakes his head. I go on to ask him what he eats. With the exception of dinner, which his wife prepares, he generally has gas station food for breakfast on the way to a job and prepared sandwiches from the grocery store for lunch. He drinks energy drinks and sports drinks to help him keep going during the day. I ask what a typical dinner might be. "We eat a lot of rice and beans," Rodrigo says, hanging his head. "I'm not supposed to, right?" A coworker who had been diagnosed with diabetes a few years ago had told him to lay off the staples he was used to eating. Rodrigo told me that he had cut back a little on his portions, and he had switched to diet drinks, as his friend had also advised. He had found that the convenience foods, however, were much harder to give up. While going through a review of various potential symptoms, Rodrigo admitted that he also had been having some bloating and gas. "For how long?" I asked. "Since I came to the U.S., I know it's from American food. People are always complaining about their stomach here." But Rodrigo's intestinal upset wasn't going to kill him the way the diabetes might if left uncontrolled. Diabetes is a nefarious killer, chipping away at its victims' organs slowly, killing them quietly until the end, when limbs are lost and days each week are spent on dialysis. But it is hard to consider that today's choices may lead to dialysis or death 20 years hence. The future is far away. For stressed, already overburdened people, it can be difficult to make choices today that may have no impact for years to come. Moreover, when people upend their lives to make changes and then don't see the results they were expecting, it can make them feel like it wasn't worth the effort. I could already sense Rodrigo's frustration building. He had been trying to follow what he thought were the rules, and yet here he was being told that he had diabetes anyway. And, of course, Rodrigo wasn't alone. Across the country, rates of diabetes have been increasing year after year. Other conditions like metabolic syndrome and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease have only been identified within the past 50 years, but already affect great swaths of the U.S. population. Along with IBS, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and colon cancer, all refer to these as diet-related diseases, which are on the rise. We need to start to dig a little deeper for answers as to why diet-related diseases are increasing so rapidly. And we'll start to do that in this chapter. But first, we have to stop blaming ourselves for these ailments. Your diagnosis isn't your fault. It is easy, of course, to blame ill health on poor choices, even when seemingly better explanations exist. We look askance at people who suffer with type 2 diabetes or high cholesterol, or those who struggle with their weight. We conclude that they must be doing something wrong. Unfortunately, there is a long-standing precedent for doing so, and we don't need to go back terribly far in medical history to find a relevant example. As recently as the 1990s, the medical establishment insisted that the cause of stomach ulcers was stress. When the Australian physician Barry Marshall correctly identified a bacterium, Helicobacter pylori, as the usual cause, no one would listen to him. He became so frustrated by his colleagues that he proceeded to purposefully ingest a large quantity of the bacteria and cause ulcers in himself to prove his point. H. pylori is now recognized as the proximate cause of many ulcers and is treated with a 2-week regimen of antibiotics. In 2005, Dr. Marshall, along with his pathologist co-researcher, received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. Dr. Marshall has further proposed that the cause of a lot of diseases that we can't figure out these days is likely to be bacterial or viral. It turns out that our bodies aren't temples, they are gardens, and our gardens can grow lovely, beneficial microorganisms, which we might refer to as good microorganisms, or treacherous weeds, bad microorganisms. Our microbiomes, ourselves. Our microbiomes are supposed to be our buddies. These gut bacteria, and some fungi and viruses, help with things that make intuitive sense, like our digestion, and things that until just recently hadn't even been considered, like our moods. But we don't fully understand them. So far, science has gotten around to thoroughly studying only a handful of the hundreds of organisms that make up our microbiomes, like bifidobacteria, which are among the most abundant, and lactobacilli, which were some of the first identified. The Human Microbiome Project is currently underway to try to understand what is going on in our guts. But it turns out that mapping the microbiome is several magnitudes harder than mapping the human genome, where there is far less variation. Human beings are remarkably biologically similar. Our microbiomes, not so much. There is a fair chance that while you share 99.9% of your DNA with your neighbor, you two might share only 10% of your microbial genomes. In fact, your microbiome is profoundly different, not only from your neighbors, but also from what your own microbiome looked like yesterday, depending on what you ate. Just like different plants in a garden require specific fertilizers depending on the species you are trying to grow, bacteria and fungi in our microbiome grow or don't grow depending on what we feed them. And sometimes they can start to work against us. The bacteria in our guts are doing pretty much what we like to do. They're eating, hanging out, procreating, and producing byproducts of digestion. Some of the bacteria are great members of our intestinal gardens and actually contribute to making our mucus lining better and stronger. Others outcompete the good guys for land, and when there are too many of them, or they don't get fed enough of the food they enjoy, they start consuming the lovely mucus. It turns out that a variety of diseases can be correlated to a dysbiosis, imbalance of microorganisms in our guts. The mucus is meant to keep bacteria, along with the fungi and viruses, in our guts where they belong. When it gets degraded by bacteria, elements of the microbiome may get too close to the actual cells, making up our
Sample complete. Ready to continue?